are on count 2, count 1, crimes against humanity, punishable under Article 7 of the ICC statute, also with Article 28 of the ICC statute, count 2 of war crimes, punishable under Article 8 2A and Article 8 2B and Article 28 of the ICC statutes. We will continue with the issues under consideration, whereby we will be proving if this court has jurisdiction to try the Handad case, if there is reasonable basis to believe that Lieutenant Colonel Armitage committed crimes against humanity and war crimes. If it furthermore pleases the court, we would like to follow with the jurisdiction of the court. The court has jurisdiction in accordance with the statute establishing the crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crimes of aggression, as pursuant to Article 5 of the ICC statute. The case was referred by the United Nations Security Council, thus the precondition to exercise jurisdiction is satisfied under Article 12 of the ICC statutes, giving material jurisdiction over the crimes Lieutenant Colonel is being charged of. The prosecution team requests, pursuant to Article 61, paragraph 7, to provide sufficient evidence to establish substantial grounds for the crimes Lieutenant Colonel is being charged. If it pleases furthermore...
Counsel, you said, where do you derive your jurisdiction from, the jurisdiction to submit your case in the ICC?
We have stated by proving that the court has jurisdiction within the crimes that this court is supposed to try under Article 5 of the ICC statute. Furthermore, we are proving...
And under those provisions, we have different ways under which the court can be seized for adjudicating the matter. And within those elements, which one do you derive your jurisdiction from?
We are deriving the jurisdiction on Article 5 that we are basing on, for we are charging Lieutenant Colonel Armitage on 2 counts, one which is crimes against humanity and war crimes.
Under what conditions can you submit the case to the ICC, and where does the ICC as a body or as a court get a jurisdiction from? We have several ways under which the ICC can have jurisdiction. So in particular, where do you get the powers, or where does the court get the powers to adjudicate the matter in precise?
In precise, well, we are going to prove the material, territorial, and personal condition that gives this court the power to try the case at hand. Whereby we are proving first of all, that the law provides that after the entry into force of this statute, this court is eligible to try the case at hand. The Republic of Atava is a state party to the Rome Statute. The conduct forming the basis of the crimes against humanity, war crimes, terrorism, in armed conflict are to be tried before the ICC as pursuant to Article 13B of the ICC. The armed conflict took place between 2016 and 2017, which provides the court with the jurisdiction ratione temporis under Article 11, paragraph 1. The conduct of the accused constitutes war crimes, which gives this court the jurisdiction ratione materiale under Article 5 of the ICC. Lieutenant Colonel emphasized by Article 27 of the ICC, Your Honors, that clearly states that any person will be charged equally with justice without any distinction based on an official capacity, which is in accordance with the principle 4 of the Nuremberg Statute, which also clearly states that the fact that a person committed the crimes under the order of the government or his superior does not relieve him from criminal responsibility, thus proving this court to have power to try the case at hand. Thank you. If it pleases the court, I would like to give my fellow counsels to continue with the substantive arguments.
Thank you, honorable judges and co-counsel Leila.
I'd like to continue with the substantive arguments. The prosecution submits to this chamber to find Lieutenant Colonel Armitage criminally liable or criminally responsible for the crimes against humanity and war crimes under the doctrine of superior responsibility. Under this doctrine, based on Article 28 of the ICC Roman Statute, the doctrine of superior responsibility goes as a superior is held responsible for the action or the wrongings that were perpetrated by this troop. Hence, with the case here, with Lieutenant Colonel Armitage's troop. Lieutenant Colonel Armitage's troop committed crimes against humanity by beating, by forcibly beating, by depressing people, by committing murder. All these crimes were committed by his troops while they were under his command.
Counsel,
Yes.
if I may ask, you said he's being brought before court under the doctrine of superior responsibility. Do you want to mean under all circumstances, a military commander or any person with superiority over the subordinates can be held criminally liable? Or there are some circumstances, and if there are some circumstances, please do mention them.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll go furthermore saying that superior responsibility, a person is held by superior responsibility when he either fails to stop the actions that were perpetrated by his troop, if he knowingly or had reason to know that actions were being done, or if he failed to take the perpetrators to the competent court or to the levels where they should be prosecuted. Also, by this article, it goes hand in hand with the Article 86 and 87 of the Additional Protocol 1 of Geneva. Furthermore, under the
Sorry,
doctrine...
Counsel, before you go any further.
Yes.
So what was the role of the Lieutenant Colonel in committing these crimes?
The role of the Lieutenant Colonel is that he's under this crime because he neglected, first of all, to stop his troop in committing the crimes, whereby he, as we have seen, failed to stop the crimes where his troop were either destroying properties or forcing harsh treatments on the population. And furthermore, I would like to add that under the command of his troops fired arms on the inhabitants of Pata, a place where there was a civilian population. And in addition to that, the colonel had information to know that his troops were making crimes because people of the Nambi village raised and talked to the media and informed that they were being harshly treated. Further, with that information being provided for, the lieutenant failed to either stop it or to take the perpetrators to the justified court. So I would like to continue. Furthermore, with this, under the commander responsibility, we would like the court to help Lieutenant Colonel Armitage, criminally responsible for the crimes against humanity. For crimes against humanity under Article 7, crimes against humanity, in order for them to be present, they should have some sharper elements. There should be a wild or a systematic spread of attack under civilians, which was the case here. Now, under the crimes against humanity, I would like to give the accounts that were committed. Under these crimes, there was murder, Article 1. Article 7(1)(a). There was the commitment of murder. That's count 1. Count 2, we have forcible displacement of the population. Count 3, we have the crimes of rape. Under this, I would like to go into more details. On the crimes of murder, the prosecution charges would like the court to help Lieutenant Colonel liable for the crime of having failed to stop the death of elements in the Namibi village, also for having commanded the killing of 15 people by helicopters. This was an act that was done on the 22nd October, whereby a helicopter under the RDF shot and killed each and every killed houses, leading to the deaths of 15 people. Furthermore, I would like to go on count 2, on the Article 7, 2D, on depressment of the population.
Council, just
Yes.
a second. I would like to ask, you talked about most of the fundamental elements of crimes against humanity, and you talked about widespread and systematic. So I have a simple question, or one or two questions. One is, what does it mean to say widespread or systematic? And is it important to have both elements for a crime to materialize, or you can explain to us? And then relate it to the facts that we have.
But the elements to a crime against humanity is widespread and systematic. But in case there's both or one, then there is a crime against humanity. I will relate to this case of murder, saying that there was a systematic, because as we see that there is a pattern that the RDF forces are following. In the Bora province, in the Namibi village, they beat people. They mistreated them, leading to a death of another man. Following, they went to the Pata village. They started shooting, and leading to the deaths of 15 people. Hence, showing that in these actions there was a pattern. Thank you, Council.
You still have 4 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you, INES. Thank you, my fellow co-counsel. As it has been stipulated by my fellow councils, I'd like to also submit to the court that the court finds criminally responsible Lieutenant Colonel Armitage for war crimes. When they talk of war crimes, they talk it has sharper elements, amongst which it must constitute a war crime, and under the war crimes there must be an international war or an international war crime. It must be also be the crimes committed should also be amongst the crimes that fall within the jurisdiction of the court, and there should be violations of the Geneva Conventions, and there should also be the violations of the international customary laws. With the sharper elements, they are in the Atava region. There was a non-international conflict. This arose when there was establishment of a rebellion group which was known as the Bolan Lions, which fought for the liberty of the Bolans, and for one group to qualify as a rebel group, it must be having a hierarchy whereby the Batman, under the statement of relevant facts, Batman was the head of the Bolan group, of the rebellion group of the Bolan Lions, and they also had a uniform which was in black, and they also had a symbol which was a yellow lion indicated on the uniforms. But furthermore, as it is stipulated under paragraph 9 of the statement of relevant facts, with this regard, it also leads us to whereby we also submit to the court that the court finds criminally responsible the Lieutenant Colonel Armitage for launching attacks against the civilian population and civilian objects. With this regard, we base our argument under Article 8, Paragraph 2, subparagraph B, Roman numeral 4 of the ICC of the Roman Statute.
Counsel, can you prove to this court the nexus between Lieutenant Colonel Armitage with the non-international armed conflict as you are advancing before this court?
Your Honor, in this regard, Lieutenant Colonel Armitage committed these crimes when there was a non-international conflict, and in that conflict there was crimes committed, just like killing of people. Reason being, there is no way that they don't kill people.
So you mean the fact that there was a non-international armed conflict, it automatically attributes responsibility to the Lieutenant Colonel Where
It's-
is the nexus? What is his individual criminal responsibility?
Your
Prove
Honor,
that to the court.
Your Honor, his criminal responsibility can also be attributed to him as a commander. The reason being that it was through the armed forces that the crimes were committed. And with that regard, I would like to proceed, if it pleases the court, whereby there was launching attacks against the civilian population, and there was destruction of properties, just like the destruction of the village supermarket and the local grain warehouse, which was the source of food for the
1 minute prosecution.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Your Honor. So there was the destruction of the property for the citizens, and amongst that there was this is based on the principle of non-conditionality, whereby there was bombardment of the buildings and there was killing of people in the village. With this regard, this leads us to the war crimes.
Counsel,
Yes,
just
please.
briefly, as you end,
Yes.
tell us when you're distinguishing between civilian population and civilian object with military objectives and non-combatants. Give us what is the test for for those two.
In this regard, the civilian population will consider the mass population of the people.
No,
with
tell us the elements of test. What are the conditions, or how do you test the difference between civilian objects and military objects? Just distinguish between us.
The civilian population shouldn't be armed, and in this regard, we look at this regard that they were armed. They were armed. The people were armed. So in this regard, the civilian objects. This is the protected objects under the Roman Statute. If it pleases the court, I'd like to proceed with the Armitage criminal responsible for using starvation as a method of warfare. And in this regard, it is to the court that we submit our prayer that with the court finds Lieutenant Colonel Armitage criminally responsible under Article 28 of the Roman Statute for crimes whereby the court has jurisdiction to try this case, and to also find Lieutenant Colonel Armitage criminally responsible for war crimes and crimes against humanity. It's hereby I rest my case.
Defense. The prosecution has already submitted its legal submission on the counts against the Lieutenant Colonel, the modus operandi, and also the individual criminal liability. So the floor now is for the defense. This is to remind you also that you have 15 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Honorable Judge. As I said, I'm called Tungine James from the defendant counsels. Mr. President of the Tribunal, the armed struggle between the lions of Baran and the government of Atava is not so-called an armed conflict. And also, Mr. President of the Tribunal, the court lacks the jurisdiction of this case. Mr. President of the Tribunal, the defendant, according to the Article 61 of the Rome Statute of International Criminal Court of 1988, Rome Statute, the prosecution shall have the basis on hearing determining whether there is sufficient evidence to establish the substantial grounds to believe that Lieutenant Colonel Armitage committed each of the crime charged as it happened on Article 61. But Mr. President of the Tribunal, the prosecution lacks the sufficient evidence to charge Colonel Armitage these crimes that he is being said that he committed. Mr. President of the Tribunal.
Counsel, yes, if you may tell us what is the role of the newspapers or the media in prosecuting this kind of crimes?
The role of mass media is just to tell the people and to announce the people of how the cases was being adjudicated by the courts, and also to publish the results for the cases that was happened. And if it pleases the court, I may continue by elaborating about the point that I said about the lack of jurisdiction of this court. Mr. President of the Tribunal, by regard to international humanitarian law, the criteria of the intensity and sufficiency degree of organization is used solely for the purpose as a minimum of distinguishing an armed conflict from banditry, unorganized and short-lived insurrections or terrorist activities which are not subject to international humanitarian law. So, Mr. President of the Tribunal, as it is being provided by Article 1, 2, Additional Protocol 2, which excluded the internal disturbances and tensions as well as terrorists to under jurisdiction of IHL or international humanitarian law. So for us, we have seen that the court lacks the jurisdiction for this case because it includes the internal disturbance and it was the struggle to fight against terrorists. Mr. President of the Tribunal.
Before you proceed any further, you say the court lacks jurisdiction over this matter. Is
Yes.
it in regard to war crimes or to crimes against humanity or all? You may explain further on that.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable. For us, it's all the crimes that the court lacks jurisdictions. For charging the Colonel Army charge, the crimes that is alleged to be committed. For the following factors that we supplement. Mr. President of the Tribunal, in order to understand the difference in internal armed conflict from internal banditry disturbances, there are some elements that need to be considered as to has been provided by Article 8C, the elements of crimes published by International Criminal Court.
Counsel,
Yes.
if you may let us know, is lack of sufficient evidence a fact or a factor of jurisdiction or a factor of substance or merits of the case?
The sufficient degree of evidence, it just constitutes the. It can help in not taking the case to the jurisdiction of the court, which can, where the sufficient degree is there, it can mean in the lack of jurisdiction of the court. By continuation, Mr. President of the Tribunal, allow me to elaborate about the nature of the armed conflict that is being said that happened in the government of Atafa. Mr. President of the Tribunal, the armed struggle between Armitage government and the so-called Lions of Bran is not an armed conflict because an armed conflict exists whether there is a resort to armed force between states or prolonged violence between government authorities and organized armed group or between the group within the state. This was being proven by the prosecutor vs. Thomas Robanga as it's being referred in the case. Mr. President of the Tribunal, in respect to the Rome Statute, the armed conflict or prolonged violence depends on the sufficient degree of organization and the intensity of the conflict. If the President's Court, I may continue. Mr. President of the Tribunal, there are factors that can help to determine whether the organization has the sufficient degree of organization. Mr. President of the Tribunal, this is being held in the case Prosecutor vs. Lubanga Dailo in the court trial chamber 1. Those factors were the force internal hierarchy, the command structure, and the rule.
Counsel,
Yes.
if you may tell us, what does it imply if in any, as you said, a banditry, helicopters are employed and soldiers are employed? Do we analyze or we see any level of intensity or there is no intensity at all?
Mr. President of the Tribunal, thank you. Here, the level of intensity can happen, but when the sufficient degree constitutes all those elements, when it lacks one of the elements, the case doesn't be admissible. Thank you. Mr. President of the Tribunal, the third one is the force's ability to plan military operation and put into effect. The last one is the intensity of any military involvement. Mr. President of the Tribunal, with regard to the case of Prosecutor vs. Dusko Tadic, the judgment put into consideration the two criteria for a group to be entailed as an armed group. So here it will lead us to know whether the so-called lines of Baran were an armed group or were not an armed group. Mr. President of the Tribunal, the first is the hostilities must reach the minimum level of intensity. This may be the case of right to use the military force against insurgencies instead of more police forces. But in the case, the government of Atava used the police to go and arrest and search in the village of Bola. Mr. President of the Tribunal, the second is non-government group involved in the conflict must be as a party to the conflict. But when you see here, there is no recognized armed group that was in the government of Atava. However, they are the people that were called lines of Baran, which were not organized and were not having an official operations and capabilities, the capacity to exercise those actions. Mr. President of the Tribunal, in the case of Prosecutor Vas Thomas Rubanga, the Satani command the capacity and sustain military operations. But when we found that there is no military operations and some of the capacity and command structure that was elaborated in the case to be the ground for considering this as an armed group, as for us to have seen that this was the terrorist groups that was being against the government of Atava. Mr. President of the Tribunal, pursuant to the above mentioned facts about the clear definition about armed conflict, the struggle between...
if you may, excuse me, if you may tell us what was the reason for Lieutenant Colonel Amirage and the 120 soldiers of ADF and other policing officers, what were the reasons of going into the Namada village?
Thank you, Mr. President of the Tribunal. The reason was to search for the terrorists that was being just making the conflict in the country and just the bombing. Before they went there, the terrorists have been bombed the Atava building. So this was the case where the government, in just looking to the general interest of the people, to search for terrorists that was backing the insecurities in the country.
So you mean soldiers or soldiers can be used in policing practices?
Where necessary.
Give us the circumstances under which.
Yes.
Just mention us some circumstances.
Yeah, due to the fact that the intensity of the armed forces and the weapons that was being used. So it's not easy to mention that the soldiers would not be there. However, the armed group, the banditries and the terrorists were using such dangerous bombs that was being dangerous to the citizens. So in this case, the government would employ the soldiers so that they can fit those terrorists in that country so that they can bring back peace in the country.
But, sorry, in your qualification you said there was no intensity, so we assume there was no need of soldiers. But now you say, given the intensity of the...
I will explain, Mr. President.
Yes, please.
So, I have said, if the President of the court, I have said that if there are elements that have been considered so that the armed can be called an armed group. So by this, the intensity of the war can be engaged. But while there are lack of some elements in that case, it can't constitute to be an armed group. If the President's court, I may continue. Mr. President of the Tribunal, pursuant to above mentioned facts about the clear definition, the Lions of Bran is no way an armed conflict. Mr. President, regarding to the condition of internal force hierarchy, the Lions of Bran have not shown any organization structure, and there is no recognized leader of the force except a man named Batman, who does not want to reveal himself, as it was being provided in the case. Mr. President of the Tribunal, allow me also to look about the command. There is no command to the Lions of Balan, but instead the purpose is to destroy the whole country by bombing and burning the country's properties and the people. Pursuant also to the, even though also, Mr. President of the Tribunal, there is no international definition for terrorism. In some international legislation, terrorism suggests an involvement.
Counsel, before you go any further,
Yes.
so by what you've been advancing, you want to tell or convince this court that the fact that there were only internal disturbances, there were no clear structure of command, it makes it that there were no, the case should not be admissible even for crimes against humanity?
Thank you, Mr. President of Honorable President of the Tribunal. It may be admissible if Colonel Armitage is being responsible for those crimes. But as I'm going to read, Colonel Armitage, we have understandable evidences for not basing that Colonel Armitage is responsible for these crimes against humanity. Thank you, Mr. President of the Tribunal. By continuation, in order to understand the difference of internal armed conflict from internal banditry disturbance, some elements are needed to be considered, and also by looking to the